So we have just found every accessible file in WordPress on this Hack the Box site, excluding some of the ones we don't care about, like CSS files, JPEGs, GIFs, things like that. But yeah, we did it through a simple script here. Welcome to Black Hat Python. We're finally into the section that I've been wanting to get into for a long time here, which is the web hacking section. So in this first one, they taught us the script, which I'm showing you the output now because it takes quite a while to run. And I'll explain some reasons as to why that is here in a second. But yeah, as you see, we found a number of files, and we could even make this script smarter by saying, hey, there's certain ones that we care about. Let's try to find those. But we're able to take advantage of the fact that WordPress is open source. And because it's open source, right, we can look at the source code and see like the common files by downloading WordPress on our local system. And we could get all the files there, and then we can just search for them by making requests to them. That's all the files there, right? So we have a lot to dig into as an attacker here if this was a site that we were going to go after. So let's get into the source code, of course. So we'll be using these libraries here: context lib, os, queue, request sys, threading, and time. And so the first thing that we're going to do, we're going to define a couple key variables up here, our filters. So we want to filter out the JPEGs, GIFs, PNGs, CSS files, because we're going to be looking for files that we care about as an attacker. And these typically, unless you're doing something super CTF-y where there's steganography involved, we're probably not going to need any image files or any styling. And then we'll give it the target. I chose to do this on a Hack the Box machine. In the Black Hat Python book, they had a sample server to go after. However, it looks like that server got taken down by the hosting service provider themselves. So maybe a lot of people were hitting that server with requests from running the script. So for one reason or another, it got taken down. So I just decided to do it on a Hack the Box machine that was running WordPress. That's something we could do, simple enough, right? And here's where we define our threads. We're going to do it with 10 threads. Now, before I go any further, let me explain threading in Python. I've never used the queue module before, but from what I can tell, and someone in the comment section, correct me if I'm wrong here, but from what I can tell with this module is that this is a multi-threading module, not a multi-processing module. So basically, what multiprocessing is that it will use multiple processors on your machine, so multiple CPUs, right? Whereas multi-threading will use multiple threads on a single CPU. Now, the problem with multi-threading in Python is something called the global interpreter lock. So basically, what happens in Python is when you have something that's multi-threaded, it doesn't really matter too much because the global interpreter is single-threaded. So the global interpreter will only be able to run one thread at a time, process one thread at a time. So you don't get any speed increase out of multi-threading, but you get the other benefits of multi-threading, such as like getting like the thread safety and things like that if you have, if you're implementing that properly. And you can have multiple threads going at the same time, but you won't have them actually performing faster. And I think that's kind of what's happening here because the script was taking quite a long time to run. But Python does support multiprocessing, so if we were using another module, like I know Tiberius likes to use this new module that recently came out called Asyncio, however you want to pronounce that. That's something I want to look more into. Maybe we could even down the line rewrite this to use that. But yeah, just something I wanted to point out there. It's an important thing to understand with Python. Because Python, it gets a bad rap for being slow, but there's a lot of ways to make it faster. Like if you ever use tools like dir search, that uses multiprocessing, right? Auto Recon also uses multiprocessing. That was created by Tiberius. And those tools run really fast, even though they're written in Python. How is that? It's because they're using multiprocessing. So something to point out. And now let's just start down in the main here. So, we define these variables, and also we define, we basically initialize answers and web paths. These are what we're going to use for our multi-threading here. And the way you do it with the Q module is you can say q.q to call that class, I guess. And then what we're going to do from here is we will say with chdir and then pass in the location of our WordPress. So what we did is we went to wordpress.org/download and we downloaded this on our Kali box. And this is where I chose to store it in ops scripts WordPress. And so that's the complete WordPress installation with all the WordPress files. And that's what we're going to pass into our chdir script. You'll see what that is here in a second, or chdir function, I should say. And then we'll run gather paths, which is another function. And then we will have the user be prompted to press enter to continue. That way the user can look at, hey, here's all the files that we've gathered. So basically all gather paths is doing, I guess I'll go to it now. It's just gathering the paths, right? So the chdir is the first thing we called. We pass in a path to that. And that path, like we saw, that's just the location to our WordPress installation. And I think these comments say it pretty succinctly here. We have an on enter change directory to the specified path, right? And then we have an on exit change it back to the original. So the original is what we can get with just by running os.get current working directory. And then this os change dir path will be the specified path that we pass in here, which will be our WordPress, right? And so that's all that's going on there. And then for the gather paths, we're just gathering all of the paths in from the WordPress installation. So we can literally loop through all of the, walking through using os.walk. So the os module, very handy in a program like this. So we can run through all of those, and we can actually look at the file extensions as well and filter out, if we hit any JPEG, GIF, PNG, CSS files, we can just ignore those. And for the rest of them, we can just keep adding them here, and we can strip off the dot as well. If it starts with the dot, we can just strip that off. And we're going to keep appending it to paths. And this dot put is, I believe that's something with the Q module here. That's how you can append to this here, and we'll basically add it to the queue. So we're only interested in adding those ones to the queue. That's why we do that. That's going to basically add up all those files, all of the PHP files, text files, things like that, JS, into our queue, all the files, from the WordPress installation, right? Because those are known files in WordPress. That's what we want to check against. So once that's done, the user can, take a look, because we're printing them off along the way, so the user can see exactly which files those are. And after he's had a look of those, he could press enter, and it'll continue on, and then call the run function. So the run function is what will, create this list here, my threads, and we're just going to go through, we're going to iterate through all the threads here from this threads variable, which is 10. So we're going to say to run 10 of these at the same time. But of course, the global interpreter lock, we'll be running 10 at the same time, but we won't get the speed increase of it won't be 10 times faster because of the global interpreter lock, like I was mentioning. But we can print off a message each time we spawn a thread. So basically, as soon as we press enter, we should see that it spawns all 10 of them right away. It's going to run those 10 at a time. And what it'll do is just use the multi-threading here. So you use the threading module for that. And I guess the queue, now that I mentioned, now that I'm actually reading through this and verbalizing this, the queue isn't what is doing the multi-threading. This is the multi-threading part. The queue is just for the thread safety, I believe. But we're going to keep appending to my threads. So it's going to be a list of these threads here, and then we'll do this to start it. So that's what it's going to do at the very end, is just start all the threads. So it's going to initialize everything, start it, and then they'll all 10 be running. So from there, we'll go ahead and write to a file called myanswers.txt, shorthand it to F, and as long as there's answers, so the answers part, let me see exactly where that was so I can tell you guys. Yeah, the test remote, right? I think I skipped over that. Yeah, I glazed over this here, but this is actually pretty important here. Our target will be test remote. So test remote is going to be, it will take in all the web paths that we grab from our WordPress installation, and it will, for each one, it will set the URL equal to the target and the path, right? So the target was like the base URL basically, and the path was the specific path in the WordPress installation. So it's gonna put those two together, and it's going to sleep for 2 seconds so we don't hammer the server too hard or get like a 429 error or something like that, I suppose. And then we're gonna actually use the request library to make that GET request. And we're just gonna be checking for the status code. If it's 200, then obviously it's accessible. So we'll write the plus symbol to the screen. We'll also add this to the answers queue. And obviously if it's not accessible, then we could just write an X to the console, and we don't really need to do anything with it at that point. And because we're using sys.standardout.write, we will need to use sys.standardout.flush afterwards. And so that's basically going to write or going to keep appending to a queue of for the answers, right? That's what we defined up here as a global. And so once it goes through and does all that, what it can check for down here is saying, while there's still stuff in this answers queue, right? While it's not empty, write to the file, right? Because that's the only thing we want written to the file, the ones that were 200 okay, right? If they weren't accessible, then we don't really need to write that anywhere. We won't need to look at that. We're just concerned with what we actually found. So we'll write that to the file. So I'll show you guys just how it does take quite a while. But first, let me cat this to the screen before it's gone forever, because it's going to overwrite the file then. I'll just do this part in a new window here. So we could say Python 3 and mapper.py. And see, it comes up with all the files it's going to check against from the WordPress installation. After I had a look, I can press enter. It'll say spawning, all 10 of these threads here. And maybe to clean this up, I could have said I+1, so spawning threads 1 through 10 instead of 0 through 9. But yeah, look, anytime it hits an X, that means it didn't get a 200 okay. All the pluses are 200 okays, and as we saw earlier, we found a lot of stuff here. So it's gonna take quite a bit. I think that it goes through, and it's about 3 rows of this until it actually completes. It takes quite a bit of time to actually complete this, but yeah, that is this script here, and a pretty neat thing. And we could apply this to literally, we could modulate this for any open source web application. Here we did it on WordPress, but we could do this with just as easily with Drupal or I'm drawing a blank, any CMS or any open source web application. All that we would need to do is download that on our system, get the files on our system, and then change the directory that it points to from this one here to the location of whatever it is we're trying to map out. And it will then grab all the files in there, ignore the file types we want to ignore, and pass it the target we want to run it against, and it will start making those requests, look for the 200 okays. So for example, one thing I want to demo here is it found all these files, right? So let's just say that we want to take a look at one of these files, right? Because that's what you would do afterwards. You'd be like, okay, I found these files. Which ones are interesting? Maybe we could add some logic down the line to determine which ones we care about and filter out what we don't care about. I feel like we do need to filter a bit more on this. I feel like they didn't filter enough. But yeah, say we want to see like maybe a package.json file. Apparently this one is accessible, right? We could copy this, and we go up here, paste this in our browser, and here is the JSON file, the package.json for this. So yeah, just to prove that it works to you guys. And meanwhile, this thing is gonna run and run and run until it gets done. Like I said, 3 or 4 rows of this until it completes. But yeah, I won't bore you guys waiting on that one. So yeah, hopefully this video helped you. If so, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the like button as well to help me out in the algorithms. And we've made a lot of these videos at this point. We're getting into my favorite section, but if you want to catch up with some of the other sections that were definitely really interesting, really good stuff, I have those videos on screen right now on my Black Hat Python playlist. I'll see you guys right over in those videos. Thanks for watching.